Have you ever sat completely still while someone used a microphone to tell 200 people that you are nothing, and felt, for the very first time in your life, entirely free? I was sitting at table 12, near the back corner of the Knoxville Country Club's main ballroom, the night my father made the biggest mistake of his life. It was his 60th birthday dinner. 100 round tables with white linen. A string quartet in the corner. Catered by the most expensive restaurant in the county. The kind of event Robert Whitfield had been imagining for decades, and he wanted every person in that room to know it. He took the stage in his custom charcoal suit, microphone in hand, and began working through his family introductions the way a man does when he has rehearsed this moment. His wife, Patrice. The love of my life. Applause. Her son, Connor. My legacy. The future CEO of Whitfield Transport and Logistics. A standing ovation. Then his eyes found me in the back corner. He paused. Not from surprise, he had known I was coming. It was a different kind of pause. The kind that precedes something calculated. And then there's Diane, he said. My daughter from my first marriage. 41 years old. No degree. No real career to speak of. Still finding her footing, I suppose. He smiled at the room like he was sharing a gentle joke. But she showed up tonight, so that's something. The laughter came from all directions at once. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I reached for my champagne glass, slowly, deliberately, and raised it toward the stage. Thank you, Dad, I said. My voice was steady. Clear enough for the nearest microphone to catch. That is the very last time you will ever say that about me. I set the glass down on the table without drinking from it. Then I picked up my bag, pushed back my chair, and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor. I did not hurry. I did not look back. Behind me, silence fell across that ballroom like a curtain dropping. But before I tell you what happened in the weeks that followed, and what my father discovered about the company he had been depending on for 3 years, I need to take you back to where this story really started. 17 years ago. A Wednesday in March. A conversation I had been dreading my entire adult life. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a house on Cherokee Bluff with a wraparound porch and a 2-car garage and every surface maintained to look like something out of a real estate listing. My father, Robert Whitfield, had built Whitfield Transport and Logistics himself, 40 regional freight trucks, contracts with manufacturers across 4 states, his name on every building and every vehicle in the fleet. He was proud of all of it. He wanted everyone to know it. That was simply how Robert Whitfield moved through the world. My mother, Sandra, died of a brain aneurysm when I was 7 years old. It was fast. No warning. One afternoon she was making sweet tea in the kitchen and by evening she was gone. I barely remember her face now without looking at photographs. But I remember her hands. The way she'd squeeze mine twice, very gently, whenever she wanted me to know she was proud of me. Just twice. That was her thing. 2 years after she died, my father married Patrice. She was civil to me. Polite. Present in the way that a person can be when they are generous but not attached. She had a son from her first marriage, Connor, 3 years older than me, and within 12 months of the wedding, Connor had settled so completely into the center of our household that I sometimes forgot there had ever been a time he wasn't there. I was not abused. I want to be careful about that, because the word gets used too broadly. What I experienced was something quieter and in some ways harder to name, a slow, steady erasure. Connor's grades were announced at dinner. Mine were acknowledged with a nod and a subject change. Connor's baseball games were attended by both parents, every time. Mine, I ran track in high school, my father made it to 3 and 4 years, and he was always checking his phone. When Connor turned 16, my father bought him a brand new truck. When I turned 16, Connor's old one was handed to me with the instruction to take care of it. And when Connor was accepted to the Vanderbilt MBA program, it was decided, without my input, without my presence at the meeting until the decision had already been made, that the family budget could not stretch far enough to cover both his program and my tuition at the University of Tennessee, where I was a sophomore with a 3.7 GPA and a scholarship application for a business internship in New York sitting on my desk. "We can't do both," my father told me. He was looking at the papers on his desk, not at me. "Connor's opportunity is a once-in-a-decade thing. You can go back to school when things settle down." Patrice added, with that particular smile she used when she wanted to sound warm while delivering something cold, "Plenty of women build wonderful lives without a 4-year degree, sweetheart. You're smart. You'll figure it out." I thought about reminding him that he had promised my mother he would see me through college. I had heard him make that promise. I had been sitting at the top of the stairs, 8 years old, listening through the door the night before she died. I said it anyway. "You promised, Mom." His jaw tightened. "Circumstances change, Diane." I nodded once. I drove back to school that weekend, packed everything I owned into my car, and left for Nashville with $1,800 in savings and a set of clothes that belonged to the life I was leaving behind. The only person I told was Nana Ruth. My father's mother called me every Sunday without fail. She asked about my friends, my plans, my dreams. She wrote me actual letters, handwritten, on pale blue stationery, and mailed them to wherever I was living. She had a way of seeing through every surface, right to the thing underneath, and what she saw in me she never once questioned. "You remind me of your mother," she told me once. "And of myself, before I learned to be quiet about what I wanted." Don't you ever learn that lesson, Diane? Don't you dare. She left me something when she died. Something she had been building in secret for years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My first apartment in Nashville was a 340-square-foot studio above a dry cleaner on Dickerson Pike. The radiator knocked all night. The walls were thin enough that I could tell you what my neighbor was watching on television at any given hour. I ate scrambled eggs and canned soup for the better part of my first year, and I told myself that rock bottom had one advantage no other elevation offered: there was nowhere left to fall. I got a job as an administrative assistant at a regional freight brokerage on the east side of the city. Minimum wage. No title. No trajectory, at least not one anyone could see from the outside. The owner was a blunt, heavy-set man named Earl Grady who had started the business with one truck and a handshake agreement 30 years earlier. He hired me because I showed up 12 minutes early to my interview in the middle of a rainstorm and did not mention the rain once. He said later that told him everything he needed to know about how I handled things I couldn't control. Within 3 months, he had given me responsibilities that were nowhere in my job description. "You see patterns," he told me one afternoon, watching me reorganize the carrier routing schedule. "Most people just see a spreadsheet. You see the system inside the spreadsheet." I stayed late every night. I learned every account, every route, every clause in every contract we managed. At home, I sat at my kitchen table with a laptop that was 2 software updates behind and took online courses: supply chain operations, freight logistics, business law, contract negotiation. MIT OpenCourseWare became my university. Free certification programs became my credentials. I did not call my father. I did not ask for a single dollar. When his secretary sent me a birthday card with a $50 check inside, signed from the family, in handwriting that was not my father's, I tore it in half and put it in the trash. For years after I left Knoxville, I filed the papers to open Cornerstone Advisors, LLC. Just me, a business license, a rented desk in a co-working space on Charlotte Avenue, and Jake Mercer, a former logistics manager I'd met through Earl, who believed in what I was building enough to join me before it was paying either of us a real salary. We specialized in logistics optimization, helping freight companies renegotiate carrier contracts, streamline their routing, reduce waste in their supply chain operations. Unglamorous work. Complicated, detail-heavy, easy to underestimate if you didn't understand it. I understood it better than almost anyone. I kept my name completely off the public record. No LinkedIn profile. No website with a photograph. No press mentions. All client-facing communication went through the company name and through Jake. If a client asked who was behind Cornerstone, the answer was always that the ownership preferred to operate privately. Jake asked me once why I was so careful about it. Because if my father's circle finds out I'm succeeding, I told him, one of two things happens. Either they try to take credit for it, or they try to tear it down. I'm not giving them the chance to do either. So I built in silence. And Cornerstone grew. 2 years ago, Nana Ruth died at 83, in the house where she had lived for 50 years, with her garden still blooming outside her window. I flew back to Knoxville for the funeral, sat in the back pew, and watched my father deliver a eulogy about a remarkable woman who gave everything to her family. The irony sat in my chest like a stone. 3 days after the funeral, I got a call from a lawyer named Susan Harper, from an estate firm in downtown Nashville. "Miss Whitfield," she said, "I represent your grandmother's separate estate. She established a trust fund in your name 8 years ago, with explicit instructions that no other family member be informed of its existence." I had to sit down. The trust contained $750,000. Susan read me the letter Nana Ruth had left inside the estate file. I will not quote it word for word because some things belong only to the person they were written for. But the heart of it was this: she knew what had been taken from me. She had argued with my father until she had no more words left. He would not listen. He never did. The money was mine, with no conditions and no strings, to build the life they had tried to take from me. At the bottom, in her careful, old-fashioned cursive, "Don't be cruel about it, sweetheart. Just be honest. Sometimes the truth is punishment enough." I used part of that money to expand Cornerstone. Hired 2 new consultants. Moved to a proper office on the west side of the city. The rest I held as insurance for a day I hoped would never come. That day arrived in the form of a gold-embossed invitation. "Robert Whitfield requests the pleasure of your company. His 60th birthday dinner. The Knoxville Country Club." Black tie. I almost threw it away. I held it over the trash can for a full minute. Then I thought about Nana Ruth. About 17 years of silence. About every promise that had been broken and every door that had been shut. And I thought, he will do something unforgivable that night. He always does. When he does, I want to be there. I want to say goodbye on my own terms, in front of the people whose opinions he cares about most. I RSVP'd yes. The Knoxville Country Club had not changed in 20 years. Same brass fixtures, same self-satisfied valets, same crowd of old money and new ambition pretending they belonged in the same room. I wore a dark navy dress I had bought myself. My mother's pearl earrings. Everything I owned, I had paid for. That mattered more than the labels. Patrice caught me at the entrance. She looked me over once, quickly, the way a woman does when she is measuring a threat she does not want to acknowledge. "Diane. You came." A pause waited with implications. "We weren't certain you'd have anything appropriate." "How thoughtful of everyone to worry," I said, and walked past her. I found my seat assignment. Table 12. Near the service entrance, beside a group of family acquaintances I had never met. Not the family table. Not even close. I noted it. Sat down. Ordered sparkling water. From my corner I watched and listened. My father was holding court near the bar, surrounded by business contacts. I heard him mention Cornerstone Advisors. Absolutely essential to our operations, he told a man I recognized as the owner of a regional shipping group. Whoever runs that company is a logistics genius. Very private. We've never even met the ownership in person. My phone buzzed on my lap. "Jake, contract renewal docs from Whitfield just arrived. They're offering another 5 years and a 12% rate increase. Waiting on your call." I typed back, "I'll have an answer by the end of the week." Then the lights dimmed. My father took the stage to thunderous applause. He thanked his partners, his employees, his mentors. He credited God and luck and his own instincts in roughly equal measure. He introduced Patrice with such warmth that several women near me dabbed their eyes. He announced Connor as the incoming CEO of Whitfield Transport, effective January 1st, and received a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. And then his eyes found mine in the back corner. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Something else. And Diane. My daughter. The spotlight swung to my table. 41. No degree. No real career to speak of. Still finding her footing. A practiced pause. But she came tonight, so I suppose that counts for something. The room laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from people who think they are in on a joke and do not realize they are watching cruelty dressed as comedy. I sat perfectly still. I waited for the sound to fade. And then I stood up, raised my glass, said what I said, and walked out. I was almost to my car when Patrice caught my arm in the parking lot, her composure cracked, her voice shrill. Do you have any idea what you just did? You embarrassed him in front of his entire business circle. I looked at her hand until she released it. I think you have that backwards, I said quietly. My father appeared behind her, his face a thundercloud. Get back inside, Diane. Apologize. Now. No. The word hung between us like a stone suspended in air. He stepped forward. If you walk away from this family tonight, you are done. No support. Nothing. Do you understand me? Dad. I opened my car door. You cut me off 17 years ago. You just didn't have the courage to say it out loud until tonight. I slid into the driver's seat. I'm saying it for both of us. Goodbye. I drove 20 minutes before I pulled into a rest stop and sat with the engine running and my hands on the wheel, just breathing. Then my phone rang. It was my Uncle Lenny. My father's younger brother. The carpenter. The reader. The one who had never wanted any part of the business. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. Diane. His voice was rougher, older. I heard what happened at the dinner. Word travels fast in small circles. He paused. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. I was too much of a coward. I turned off the radio and listened. Your mother set up an education fund for you before she died. Enough to cover 4 full years at any school in the country. Your father drained it. He used it for Connor's MBA and then told you the family couldn't afford your tuition. The parking lot lights reflected off the rain-slicked asphalt outside my windshield. Nana Ruth found out, he continued. She couldn't recover what your mother left you. But she could make sure Richard, your father, never took another thing from you. That's why she set up the trust. That's the whole reason. I sat in the dark for a long time after he hung up. My mother had tried to protect my future from beyond her own grave. My grandmother had finished the job. And my father had stolen from both of them. If this story is landing close to home, if you have ever been the one in your family they quietly wrote off, the one whose sacrifices never made it into the story they told about themselves, this channel exists for exactly that. We collect real stories from online communities, reshape them for privacy, and try to understand the why behind the behavior. Not just what happened, but why people do these things to the people who are supposed to matter most to them. If that matters to you, please subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep doing this. I drove back to Nashville and did not sleep. The morning after the birthday dinner, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote out everything I knew, in 2 columns. The left column, what my father had done. The right column, what I had. It took me 40 minutes and 4 cups of coffee. When I was done, I called Susan Harper. Susan had been Nana Ruth's estate attorney. Since the trust fund became mine, she had become my attorney. Her office in downtown Nashville had floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of deliberate quiet that serious legal work produces. I was in her conference room by 11 o'clock. She had already pulled the Cornerstone contract file. Your anonymity was always going to be temporary, she said, spreading documents across the table. The question is how you want this to unfold. She pointed to a clause near the bottom of the contract. Standard 30-day termination provision. You can end the agreement for any reason, with no penalties, no legal exposure. Everything is clean. I looked at the papers. Every clause she had written had anticipated this. She looked up at me over her reading glasses. Margaret made sure of that, she said, using Nana Ruth's first name the way a friend would. She also said to tell you, don't be cruel about it. Just be honest. I nodded. I had heard those words before. That afternoon I sat with Jake in Cornerstone's conference room. He had the projections on the screen before I had settled into my chair. If Whitfield Transport lost the Cornerstone contract, they would shed roughly 40% of their operational efficiency within 60 days. In logistics, that kind of drop is not a setback you manage. It is a collapse you survive or don't. Marcus just took over as CEO, Jake said, catching himself. Connor, I mean. If this hits in his first quarter, his credibility with the board is finished before it starts. We sat with that for a moment. Draft the termination letter, I said. 30 days, per the contract. Strategic repositioning of our client portfolio. Professional. No accusations. Nothing they can use. And for your father personally? I'll write that one. I spent all of Sunday on it. 7 drafts. The first was 4 pages of every wound I had catalogued over 17 years. The second was so clipped and cold it didn't feel like me at all. The third wandered. The fourth was too much like asking for something. The fifth was close. The sixth was almost right. The final version was the shortest. It was also the truest. Dear Dad. You announced to 200 people that I have no career and no worth. I want you to know something. The company you called essential to Whitfield Transport survival, Cornerstone Advisors, is mine. I built it. I own it. For 3 years, the daughter you dismissed has been the backbone of your business operations. I am ending our contract. Not as revenge. As a boundary. My mother set aside money for my education before she died. You spent it on Connor. Nana Ruth found out. That is why she left me a trust fund you knew nothing about. She saw what you could not, that I was worth investing in. Everything I have, I built with her faith and without yours. I don't need your understanding. I just need you to know the truth. Don't contact me again. Diane Ruth Whitfield. I included my middle name deliberately. Ruth. The name I had added to my legal name 3 years ago, quietly, at the county courthouse, in honor of the only person in my family who had ever truly believed in me. I included a photocopy of the Cornerstone Advisors Incorporation papers. My name. Sole owner. Printed clearly at the top. Monday morning, Jake sent the official termination notice via courier. I sent my personal letter in a separate envelope, addressed to Robert Whitfield by name. Courier confirmation came through at 9:47 a.m. signed for by Patricia Chin, my father's executive assistant. I sat in my office and watched my phone. 10:11 a.m. missed call. Robert Whitfield. 10:14 a.m. missed call. Robert Whitfield. 10:28 a.m. missed call. Connor Whitfield. 10:41 a.m. missed call. Patrice Whitfield. 11 a.m. text from Robert, call me right now. 11:19 a.m. text from Connor, what the hell is this? Call us. 11:38 a.m. text from Patrice, Diane, this is not funny. Pick up your phone. By noon, 17 missed calls. 11 text messages. 2 voicemails I did not listen to. I responded to none of them. I had waited 17 years for this morning. They could wait a few more hours. At 2:20 p.m. My receptionist knocked on my office door. Miss Whitfield? There's a family here. They say it's urgent. They're in the lobby. 5 hours in traffic from Knoxville to Nashville, driven entirely on panic. I took a slow, even breath. I checked my reflection in the window. I smoothed the front of my blazer. Put them in conference room B, I said. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Conference room B has glass walls on 3 sides. I had chosen it deliberately. My 19 employees could see inside, though they could not hear. Witnesses, not to humiliate anyone, but to ensure that the meeting remained what I needed it to be, controlled, civil, and mine. Robert, Patrice, and Connor stood near the far window, looking out at the Nashville skyline. They had never seen this city from this angle before. From my office. My territory. My name on the lease. My father turned when I walked in. He looked smaller than he had at the podium 5 nights ago. Older. His face was the color of old plaster. Diane. His voice caught slightly on my name. Hello, Dad. I took the seat at the head of the conference table, set my folder down, and folded my hands on top of it. Hello, Patrice. Connor. I assume you received my letter. Connor stepped forward, already talking too fast. You can't just do this, this is a business contract, you can't just decide to. Sit down, Connor. I kept my voice very quiet. Very level. I won't discuss anything with someone talking at me from across the room. He looked at Robert. Robert gave one short nod. They sat. A long silence. This is a misunderstanding, my father said finally, leaning forward. Cornerstone Advisors, a company like that, you couldn't have. I started it in year 4 after I moved to Nashville. I named it. I signed every major client. I have made every strategic decision for the past 10 years. I slid the folder across the table. Company registration. Tax filings. 3 years of Whitfield Transport contracts, signed by my CFO on my direct instructions. Patrice stared at the documents. But you don't even have a degree. No. I kept my voice level. You made sure of that. I was 20 years old and told to give up my future so her son could go to Vanderbilt. I did not look at Patrice when I said it. I kept my eyes on the documents. I built something anyway. You planned this, Connor said. His voice had gone flat and hard. You've been setting this up for years. Waiting for the right moment to blow everything up. I planned nothing. I built a company. Your company chose to become dependent on mine. That is not something you can blame on me. You could have told us. Patrice's voice cracked slightly. You could have said something at any point in the last 3 years. When? I turned to her now. When you told me college wasn't necessary for women like me? When you told the family I'd had some kind of breakdown after the dinner? When my father announced to his entire business community that I was his greatest disappointment? She had nothing. I turned to my father. Here is the truth. I would have kept this contract going indefinitely. I had separated the business from the personal. It was working. But you stood at that podium and told 200 people, into a microphone, that I have nothing and amount to nothing. I paused. You made this choice, Dad. Not me. For just a moment, 1 breath, maybe 2, I saw something in my father's face that looked like genuine recognition. Like the specific, terrible clarity of understanding something that cannot be undone. Like he was finally looking at what he had actually done, all the way back to the beginning. Then it was gone. What do you want? He asked. His voice had flattened. There must be something. Money. An apology. Tell me what it takes. Nothing you can give me. That's not an answer. I want you to know the truth. That's all. I wanted you to understand exactly who has been supporting your company's operations for the past 3 years, and exactly why that is ending. I opened the folder to the second page. My grandmother also left me a trust fund, $750,000, specifically structured so you cannot contest it or claim any part of it. Susan Harper has already reviewed every angle. She was Nana Ruth's estate attorney. Nana Ruth chose her specifically because she anticipated you would try to make things difficult. Linda, Patrice, drew a sharp breath. Margaret knew about all of this? Robert said. She knew about the education fund my mother set up for me. The one you spent on Connor's MBA. She couldn't recover that money. But she could make sure you never took anything else from me. My father's face went from pale to red. She had no right to. It was her money. She had every right. I stood. This meeting is over. Diane, wait. I'm done. I held the door open. The receptionist will show you out. My father rose slowly. He stopped in front of me, and for just a moment we stood face to face, 2 feet apart, 2 people who shared a last name and very little else. Do you hate us that much? He asked. It came out smaller than he intended. I met his eyes steadily. No, Dad. I don't hate you. That is what you don't understand. I held his gaze. I just don't need you anymore. And that is something you are going to have to learn to live with. He had no response to that. I watched the 3 of them walk through my lobby, past my employees who carefully looked elsewhere, and out through the glass front doors of Cornerstone Advisors. Then I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and got back to work. 2 months after I sent those letters, the fallout became public. Whitfield Transport and Logistics announced a restructuring. 62 employees were laid off in early November. The press release named market conditions and strategic realignment. But in Knoxville's business community, the actual story traveled fast, the way it always does when the truth is more interesting than the official version. Their most important consulting partner had walked. They couldn't absorb the operational loss quickly enough to protect their margins. Connor was 4 months into his tenure as CEO when the board began asking pointed questions. The inheritance my father had planned, the triumphant handover of his legacy to Patrice's son, was in crisis before it had properly begun. Robert came out of retirement to help manage the damage. The celebratory exit he had choreographed at that birthday dinner became a first chapter he had to keep rewriting. The deeper wound, though, was to his reputation. 200 people had been at that dinner. They had watched Robert Whitfield introduce his daughter by cataloging her failures in front of his entire business circle. And when those same 200 people began hearing, through the natural movement of industry gossip, that the daughter he dismissed had secretly been his company's most essential partner, the whispers started and did not stop. A former colleague told me that at a Knoxville industry dinner in January, my father sat alone for the first time in 30 years of professional life. No one wanted to be associated with the man who had publicly humiliated the daughter who had privately been holding his company together. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard that. I felt something quieter. A kind of exhausted grief. Not for the family I was walking away from, I had made my peace with that. But for the family I had never actually had. For the version of my father who might have existed, in some other life, who had looked at his daughter and seen someone worth knowing. Nana Ruth had been right. The truth had done its work entirely on its own. On the business side, Cornerstone replaced the Whitfield contract within 6 weeks, 3 new clients, more diversified, more geographically stable. Jake received a promotion that was overdue by 2 years. I hired 4 new people and moved the office to a bigger space with a view of the Cumberland River. Uncle Lenny and I have dinner once a month now. He tells me stories about my mother, the real ones, not the sanitized versions I had grown up with. She was apparently fearless. Stubborn in the specific way that people are stubborn when they know they are right. She used to say that the most dangerous thing you could do to someone who had underestimated you was simply refuse to disappear. You are exactly like her, Lenny told me one evening over dinner, with a look on his face that was somewhere between proud and a little undone. She would have been so proud of you, Diane. I want you to know that. I still keep Nana Ruth's photograph on my desk. I visit her grave every few weeks and bring peonies, which were her favorite. I stand there and tell her about the new clients, the team, the office, the view. It feels strange, talking to a headstone. It also feels like something I was owed and am only now collecting. On a Tuesday morning last spring, I was standing in the doorway of my office, a glass of water in my hand, the river catching the early light below, when I remembered standing in that ballroom with a champagne glass raised in my father's direction. I had set that glass down without drinking from it. Deliberately. Because I was not celebrating anything that night. I was drawing a line in the only language he understood, public, final, and witnessed. Standing in my office doorway, water in hand, sun just coming up over the water, I realized I was finally on the other side of that line. And the view from here was better than I had allowed myself to imagine. Now, here is what I want you to understand about why this happened. Not just what happened. Why? People like my father rarely set out to harm a specific child. What they do is simpler and far more common. They build a new life, and then they quietly decide which parts of the old one are worth the cost of keeping. My father didn't hate me. He needed me to be less valuable than Connor so that what he had taken from me, my mother's education fund, my tuition, my place at the center of his attention, could feel like a reasonable trade-off rather than a theft. Once he had made that decision and told himself that story, he had to keep telling it. Every time he dismissed me in public, he was reinforcing his own justification. My failure made his choices forgivable. My success would have made them unforgivable. That is the dynamic that drives this kind of family behavior. It is not carelessness. It is a very human form of self-protection. The second thing I want you to understand is this: I was not the only one who paid for that story. His employees paid. His reputation paid. Connor paid, in ways that are still unfolding. The version of my father that might have looked at his daughter and seen someone worth knowing, that man never got to exist either. The cost of that kind of cruelty is never just one person's to bear. If you have ever been the one in your family they called the disappointment, the one whose potential felt threatening instead of celebrated, whose silence was mistaken for acceptance, I see you. I have been you. And I promise you there is a version of your life on the other side of deciding that you do not have to keep drinking from the cup they hand you. You can set it down. You can walk out. And the life you build after that can be entirely, completely yours. This story, like every story on this channel, was shared through an online community and has been adapted to protect the people in it. If any part of it resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family, your own worth, your own line in the sand, please subscribe to Revenge Stories and turn on your notifications. Your support is what makes it possible to keep bringing these stories to you. And we hope you come back. Until next time. Take care of yourself. And remember, you don't have to drink the champagne. You can just set the glass down and walk out.